It was during the 2004 presidential race that a major turning point happened for me. It was President Bush versus Senator John Kerry, and the discussions on campus were getting very heated. I supported John Kerry mostly because I deeply did not support the war in Iraq, but many of my fellow students did not support Kerry because of the issue of same-sex marriage and abortion. At the time, I did believe these were sins, but to me they were a non-issue politically. Whatever a person decided to do with their own body, just because my personal religion considered it wrong, doesn't mean that everyone, including people who don't follow my religion, should have to follow that rule. For instance, many churches believe that getting tattoos is a sin, but that does not mean it should be illegal. Not accepting Jesus into your life can get you sent to hell, but people don't go to jail for not being Christians. Back then, I felt we shouldn't enforce our religion on others. I tried to explain this to one of my Christian friends. The conversation shocked me. They told me, "I don't see how you can call yourself a Christian if you don't vote for Bush." The biggest shock happened when I heard this again, not from just another friend or fellow student, but from a pastor that I respected. In the middle of a sermon, he said the same thing. "I don't see how you can call yourself a Christian if you don't vote for Bush." I listened to his sermon for a little while longer, and then I walked out. I found myself feeling angry that people were using politics to force their personal beliefs on others. Later, I stopped going to church. I also rarely went to my student Christian groups. It was a very confusing time in my life with all the struggles with school, friends, and politics. I was being told Christians should vote a certain way and that if they didn't, they weren't true Christians. If this was a mentality people associated with the title of Christian, then I didn't want to be a part of it. It was around this time that I decided not to call myself the title of Christian because I didn't want the baggage that followed it. Now, I still consider myself a follower of Jesus. However, whenever people brought up reasons why we should vote a certain way, they would justify it using the Old Testament or passages from Paul. I started to question why we had to follow Paul's rules in the first place. I also questioned why we were using the Old Testament to cherry-pick certain laws, but ignore the rest. I started to grow distasteful of the Pauline letters and the archaic Old Testament laws, and decided to only follow passages specifically about Jesus. However, by doing this, I was rejecting a majority of the Bible, and not following and believing the whole Bible meant you weren't a real Christian. I was concerned about this and decided to talk to my dad about it. I told him I still loved Jesus, but I didn't want the baggage associated with calling myself a Christian. We talked about this for a while, and he seemed to understand where I was coming from. To him, as long as I still loved Jesus, it would be okay. Neither he nor I knew the path that I was heading toward. While what my father told me comforted me, I still wanted to find people like myself. I wanted to find others who didn't call themselves the title of Christian, so I searched on the internet. I'm sure many of you can guess what type of websites I ran into. During my junior year in college, I ended up at a website called xchristian.net. It was a site of atheists, agnostics, and pagans who used to be Christians. This was not the type of site that I wanted to go to. I only wanted to find people who were believers but didn't want to deal with the titles. But instead of leaving the site, I started to read more. These people were smart, well-informed, and argued very well against Christians. I learned so much more than I ever have learned before. I later even tried to post and argue with them. I felt smart and intellectually stimulated. I felt happy for once. I watched and debated on this website for a little while, and then one day, around the end of the fall 2006 semester, I had a class where we discussed paradigm shifts. We were asked to think about a big paradigm shift that happened in our lives. It was just then that it hit me that the biggest paradigm shift in my life had just occurred. I realized that I didn't believe anymore. I didn't even notice it was happening. There was never a knockdown argument that caused me not to believe, and I didn't think I was heading down that path. I just realized that my belief in my relationship with Christ was suddenly gone. Looking back at my life, I can see many of the factors that led to my disbelief, but back then I didn't know why I made such a dramatic change. Some of you may be asking, did I try to go back? Well, the answer would be no, and here's the reason. Once I stopped believing in Jesus or God, the idea of talking to him seemed absurd. To me, asking Jesus back into my life seemed just as strange as asking Superman to save me. Once you don't consider something real and you stop believing in it, trying to get back that connection seems incredibly strange. I didn't know what to do. I asked myself, what do I call myself? Who can I tell about this? I was scared of what others would think of me and when they found out. For a while I kept silent to my friends and family. The only people I could tell were the posters on xchristian.net and later the atheists on the YouTube community. A few months later I told my family. After having a lot of arguments and a lot of yelling, I believe they came to understand me a little bit. Even after 5 years, I think they still feel I'm going through a phase, but in the end, I'm just glad they accept me despite what I believe. I'd like to say that my life as an atheist has gone surprisingly well. Despite my difficulties in school, I ended up graduating from college. I even met someone very special to me who shared beliefs almost similar to mine. That someone is my wife, and she has been the strongest source of happiness in my life. It has been quite a journey for me. Since then, I've learned a lot about myself. I'm still an atheist, but I've learned so much more. My journey has led me to deep interests in science, philosophy, religious studies, as well as improving myself as a person. I'd also like to say that I know that the reasons that I became an atheist were not good reasons. As I said before, many of my reasons were emotional. I later learned stronger arguments and debated with numerous believers and non-believers about what I believe. In the end, I think this mentality was the most important thing I've gained. I used to blindly believe what others told me and accepted it as truth. Now I seek to learn by inquiring and questioning my previously held beliefs. I'm still learning though. My current beliefs might be wrong or they might be correct. I don't claim to have all the answers and I'm fine with that. I want to learn and discover more about the mysteries of life using science and reason. Lastly, I would like to thank all of the posters on xchristian.net, the atheist YouTube community, and the theists on YouTube, as well as my listeners for letting me voice and debate my opinions. It has helped me grow tremendously and I'm truly grateful for that. Thanks for listening.